Hey guys, I hope y'all are having a wonderful day today. So today I'm going to share with y'all my winter foundation routine for oily 40 plus skin. So it's all in the name, but we're going to be focusing on hydration. We're going to be focusing on less is more for those of us who are thinking about premature aging. And through the process, I'm going to show y'all how I did today's look. So I got interrupted so many times doing this video, so I'm really curious to see like how it's all going to play out. So please forgive me in advance if you see like some little editing stuff going on. In my mind, I feel like this video is just going to be kind of crazy to go back and edit, but anyway, before we get into the video, if this is your first time here, hello and welcome, and thank you so much for stopping by. On this channel, we do makeup videos and they cater to the 40 and over crowd, but makeup lovers of all ages are welcome. So if you are new here, please subscribe. I would love to have you join and I would really appreciate your support. Okay, y'all, let's jump right into it. Okay, so my eye makeup is already on because we're going to be focusing on complexion for today. But before we start with applying any makeup, let's quickly talk about some skincare, because skincare has to be a normal part of your makeup routine all year round. So like the level of importance of that doesn't really change from season to season. The only thing that might change is the products that you're using. Like some people have like a winter skincare routine versus a summer skincare routine, and they're switching out products. But regardless of what products you're using, you definitely want to make sure that your skin is nice and cleansed. You want to make sure it's nice and hydrated and moisturized, and I like to really focus on hydration when it's really cold out. And you also want to make sure that you're using sunscreen all year round. Even if it's like a cloudy day, you're still getting sun exposure, so you want to make sure that you're putting on sunscreen every day. So that is the last step that I did, and I like to wait for maybe like 15 minutes or so after I put on my sunscreen before I go on with my makeup. Even if your base products have SPF in them, you should still put on a sunscreen underneath your makeup. So if you're new here, I don't wear foundation primer, so we're going to jump right into foundation. If you do wear primer though, you just want to make sure that you're picking one that's not going to dry your skin out too much. Just make sure that you're picking one that's going to pair really well with your foundation. If you wear primer, you probably already have some favorites, so you can just stick with those, but you definitely want to focus on hydration and moisture when it's like really cold out. But like I said, I usually don't wear primer, so we're going to go right into foundation. So if you have oily skin, you can still wear like matte finishes during the winter time, because a lot of us who have oily skin, we do tend to gravitate toward matte finishes. So you can definitely still wear a matte foundation. You can wear a powder foundation in the winter time. You just have to make sure that you have adequate skincare underneath and that your skin is nice and prepped. But like I said, because I like to focus on moisture and hydration when it's really cold out, my preference would be a liquid water-based foundation. So for today, I'm going in with the Pat McGrath foundation. This one is pretty pricey, so in case you don't want to use something that's this expensive, this one is $68. I do want to give you a couple of options that are in different price ranges. So this Wet n Wild Tinted Hydrator is a really nice foundation, and this one is only $6, I think. I don't think it has quite as much coverage as the Pat McGrath foundation, but it does still have a good amount of coverage for it to be a skin tint. And then the Oma by Sharon C Flawless IRL foundation. This is one of my favorite foundations, and I think this is my favorite one from the drugstore right now. This one is $15, and I think that the level of coverage is pretty similar to the Pat McGrath one. And then also the Fenty Beauty Skin Tint. This one is about $30, and again, it has really good coverage, and I think it is on the same level of coverage as Pat McGrath, but it's like half the price. So you have $6, $15, $30, and the Pat McGrath one is $68. Out of all of these though, I do think my favorite is Pat McGrath, so that's why I'm going to go in with this one for today. So a lot of us have preferences between using a sponge versus using a brush. And I personally like sponges, even though sometimes you guys do see me use brushes. I like sponges when I'm thinking in particular about applying foundation on skin that is either aging, or for those of us who are thinking about premature aging, because a lot of you all know that using a sponge is going to automatically shear your coverage out. And I always say that some people might think that this is kind of like counterproductive, but I actually like it for my coverage to be sheared out like this so that I can build it up to my liking. I think using a sponge over a brush will help you to not put on too much product on your face, because especially as we're getting older, we just don't want to cake on product onto our face, and we can get the level of coverage that we want, you know, without having to put on so much product. So I do usually have to go in a couple of times and, you know, build the product up to my liking, but I just like using sponges because I think it just does a better job of helping me control how much product I'm putting on my face. And then I have quite a bit to like cover up on the cheek area. So usually when I put on my second layer, I'm just gonna concentrate it right there. And then that also helps me control how much product I'm putting on, because I don't have to put on as much product, you know, where I don't need it. So you can certainly use a brush and you can still build up your coverage with a brush too, but you know, my preference is just a sponge because it's going to shear your product out as you go. So even with me having a lot of blemishes on my cheeks, I do usually stop my coverage right here, and you can still see some stuff peeking through. For those of you who might want to build it up even more to a more full coverage, you can definitely do that, but I just like to stop right here just because I'm always kind of thinking about just not putting too much stuff on my face, and we do still have to go and set this, and your setting powder can sometimes give you a little more coverage too, so think about that. But I'm going to stop right here for foundation, and then before we move on to setting it, I am going to quickly do my concealer, and then we'll go back to the complexion and talk about the foundation a little bit more. But I'm going in with my Aucoin Sensual Skin Enhancer. You guys see me use this quite a bit, and I'm just using this kind of like as color corrector under the eye. And I know we're not talking about concealer today, but I like applying this concealer with a loose, like a fluffy brush, because again, I'm just being mindful of how much product I'm putting on my face. I don't want to put on more makeup than I need and like weigh my face down. So I like applying this particular concealer with a nice fluffy brush because it helps me to apply less. You know, when you use a more dense brush, you're going to end up putting more product on your face. Sometimes a more dense brush is necessary, but not for this step. And then on top of that, I'm using my Anastasia concealer. I forgot to tell y'all, I didn't tell y'all anything about the shades that I'm using. In the Pat McGrath foundation, I'm using the shade MD22. I always have everything listed in the description box anyway, but that was MD22, and then the Aucoin concealer is SX13, and then this Anastasia concealer is the shade 15. So because I went in with color corrector, per the usual, I'm not gonna need a whole lot of this concealer. This one is to give me a little more coverage, but it's also to brighten in certain areas. And then I always blend out in these two areas with my sponge. I think I'm gonna put a little bit more on the forehead just to further brighten it. Going back to like not caking stuff up on your face, when you're blending out your concealer on the chin and the forehead, in these two areas, you most likely don't need extra coverage in those areas. You just need some brightness, so you really don't need a whole lot of concealer in these two areas. Now in these two areas on the sides of my mouth and under my eyes, I do need more coverage. Not everyone needs more coverage on the sides of my mouth, but I always feel like on me, those areas look kind of dark. But in the areas where you do want more coverage with your concealer, just go in with something a bit more dense. I'm gonna set my concealer with my Kosas powder in the shade Pillowy, and I'm setting just right on the immediate under eye area. Okay, so let's get back to the foundation, and we're going to set it in place. So a couple of things to think about when you're picking your setting powder. So like I said earlier, you can definitely use a matte finish foundation if you want to. If you're using a liquid matte foundation, you may not need quite as much setting powder because your foundation is going to set to a matte finish on its own. And if you're using a powder foundation, well, that kind of like already has like a setting powder in it, if that makes sense, because it's already a powder foundation. It's already in powder form. But for those of you who choose to use something like what I use today, a liquid foundation, especially one that doesn't set down to a matte finish, you can still rely on your setting powder to give you more of that matte look if that's what you're looking for. Now, some powders are going to have more, like they're going to have different finishes. So for instance, the one that I used on my under eye, any powder that you use, I mean, it's a powder, so it's going to give you more of a mattified look as opposed to not using that powder. But this powder, for instance, it doesn't really have a matte finish per se. It just kind of sets everything in place, if that makes sense. Today I'm going to be using the NYX Can't Stop Won't Stop mattifying powder, and this one definitely gives you a more mattified look. What I like about this particular powder is that you really don't need to put on a whole lot at all to get a nice mattified look. So keep that in mind when you're picking your setting powders. You want to use one that just doesn't require you to put on a whole lot of product, because this is going to be an extra layer of product essentially on your face. Now also, a lot of people like to use loose setting powders, and that's fine, but I would suggest using a pressed powder because they actually lay a little nicer on the face. Your pressed powders are not going to be quite as finely milled as a loose powder, so when you're putting your powders on top of anywhere where you might have lines or wrinkles, a pressed powder is less likely to sink into those lines and wrinkles because the particles are not as small as what you would find in a loose powder. So I definitely prefer setting my face with pressed powder. So for today, like I said, I'm going in with this one. And then just like with your foundation, you just want to make sure that you're not putting on more product than you need. I know I say that in quite a few of my videos, but you just want to make sure that you're definitely setting the foundation in place, but that you're not caking the product up on your face. If you think you have like really oily skin, maybe you want to set with something that's a little more dense, like a more dense brush, or maybe even a sponge. I have oily skin, but I feel like something with this level of density is fine for me. But I'm just, you know, lightly pressing this powder on top of my foundation. And I believe I said earlier that this particular powder is going to add a little bit more coverage, which is another reason why I can lighten up on the amount of foundation that I use, because I'm getting a little more coverage from my powder. So like I said, I'm just gently pressing this into the face and making sure that all of my foundation is set. So I'm going to quickly put on my blush and bronzer, and then we'll move on to one final step. So for my blush, I am using Pat McGrath Pat McGrath Divine Blush. This one is in the shade Paradise Venus. I usually use warmer colors than this when it comes to blush, but number one, I really wanted to use this one today because I haven't used it in a long time, but also when I'm thinking about like winter makeup, we're doing like a winter foundation routine, I just feel like rosy cheeks are just like more suitable when you're thinking about like cold winter weather. Let me know if you feel the same way, but that's why I wanted to use this one for today. So for my bronzer, I'm using the Saie Beauty Sun Melt Bronzer in the shade Deep Bronze. Oh, I went like really heavy on the bronze, on the bronzer right there, but I'll go in and fix it. I'm just gonna take my sponge and just dab right over this area. I have a little bit more bronzer than I would like right here. I like this bronzer because you can just keep applying it and it'll eventually just melt into the skin, but I did put on a little bit more than I wanted to over there, so I'm just kind of going back over it with my foundation. And also going back over the nose with some residual foundation just so that my nose doesn't look super harsh. And speaking of like having that rosy look for today, I'm also going to take some of my residual blush and I'm going to kind of pat some of it like right on the center of my face. I like for my blush to go back a little bit just to give me like that lifting effect, but I think it'll look nice for today if I give myself just a little bit of redness right up in here. Does that make a difference? I feel like on camera sometimes it looks so different from what I'm seeing in the mirror, but in my mirror it added like a good amount of redness right up in here. All right, one final step with making sure that our foundation is nice and set for that cold winter weather is setting spray. Now, I don't always use a setting spray in cold winter weather because sometimes I feel like if it's like really harsh, really cold, especially like windy weather outside, sometimes that alone is enough to just make sure that our makeup is nice and set. But you might want to use a setting spray to just add like an extra boost of hydration onto your face. And setting spray is something that you can also like reapply during the day. So my favorite one is from Fenty. This is the Fenty Makeup Refreshing Spray. So I'm just gonna finish everything off with this. I do already have my eye makeup on, so I'm just gonna cover my eyes and get my face as best as I can. And then just give your spray just a minute or two to make sure it's nice and set into your face. And then we're pretty much done with the foundation, but I'm just going to show y'all how I'm going to finish off my look. So I have on the Too Faced Natural Nudes palette on my eyes. So I'm just going to tap back into this palette really quickly to give myself just a little bit of an inner corner highlight. And then if I can find my lip pencil, I'll be putting that on next. As soon as I find it, here it is. This is the NYX lip pencil in brown. I think I use this on like every video that I do, but it's just like a standard brown lip pencil. And then I'm finishing everything off with my Tower 28 lip gloss in the shade Cashew. Okay guys, here is my finished look using my winter foundation routine. So let me know what y'all think. I'm gonna have a lot of fun editing this video because I got interrupted like 100 times, but nonetheless, I hope that y'all enjoyed it. If you did, please let me know by giving me a thumbs up. Make sure you're subscribed to the channel before you head out, and I will see y'all back here for my next one. I'm pretty sure this is gonna be my last video before the holiday, so I just want to wish everybody a very happy, merry, and safe holiday, and I will be back before New Year's with 1 or 2 more videos, so I will see y'all then. Until then, take care. Have a good one, y'all. Bye.